Alright, so I'm installing this 2-inch front leveling kit on my 1997 F250 light duty, which is really just an F150 in the front, two-wheel drive. This is the one from Daystar. So I'm not really making this video as a tutorial exactly, it's just a couple of tips and tricks on it. So to install these, they're just basically like a spacer for the top of your coil spring. To install these, you're gonna have to drop the shock out. There's a bolt on top, 2 on bottom. The one on top is a 13/16. The 2 on bottom, I believe, were 14 millimeters, or 13/16 or 21 millimeter on the top. Drop that out first, and then after you do that, disconnect your sway bar end link. On a stock truck, they are 16 millimeters. You gotta have a wrench on the top and a deep well socket on the bottom. Disconnect your tie rod, which is a 13/16 or 21 millimeter. Disconnect your upper ball joint, and you know, I mean, I'm not trying to tell you guys basic maintenance stuff here. I'm just trying to tell you what it would take. So basically, this coil spring has to come out to put this on. There's no way you can do it on these trucks with the spring still in. I don't think it's possible. I made the mistake of using a spring compressor when I did this before, but it helped it come out a little bit, but it really was more of a chore and a hassle when I went to put it back in. I actually ended up taking it off before I put it back in, and just used a good long bar to slide it into the bottom pocket. So on the other side, I'm still in the process of doing the other side. I didn't use a compressor. So even though Daystar recommends you use a compressor, I'm actually saying, as somebody that has done it on this specific truck, a spring compressor makes it more difficult, not easier. So that being said, so like I said, tie rod, sway bar end link, upper ball joint. You just hit the side here on the knuckle to get the tie rod to come up, and same thing where the ball joint goes into the knuckle, you hit that, and make sure when you do it you have a jack compressing the spring right here on the bottom of the knuckle, because if you don't, that spring will pop, and there's a lot of energy in that spring even though the truck is off the ground, and somebody could get hurt. So definitely make sure you put that jack underneath. If you have the same exact model, Daystar actually has instructions with their kit. In the instructions it says use a spring compressor. I'm saying don't use a spring compressor. On these trucks it makes it harder. And also Daystar's instructions say take off the caliper. The reason they say that is because there's this rubber line on the caliper, see, and when the whole knuckle comes down, it'll stretch on this line. But if you are mindful of this, right, and you don't let this get stretched out too much, especially, you know, if you have like pretty good condition ones, you don't even have to worry about it. But if you have older ones, you might have to take off the caliper. In my case, on both my sides, I haven't had to take off the caliper and I haven't broken the line. But it's kind of like hit or miss, you know. You can take it off just to be sure you're not going to break it, but I don't think it's absolutely necessary. So another thing is you don't have to replace your shocks to put these in. Like, the shock will stretch out long enough for it, but the thing that I ran into is I snapped off the top of both my shocks when I took them out because they're just real old. So I just went ahead and just threaded a nut on top of it just so I can put it on the ground and move it from where it is, and I'm gonna run out and get 2 new shocks. Doing shocks on these trucks is real easy. So it's just I don't have them right on hand. If you do get new shocks, which I kind of recommend now that I'm doing it, make sure you get them 2 inches longer than stock, because it's a 2-inch kit, or whatever kit you have, whether it be a 2-inch, 1.5, 3-inch, whatever you might have. So I've got this part torn apart, so like you can see this end link is junk. I replaced the end link on the other side, and I'll be replacing this one too. So as you can see, I got this out, didn't use a spring compressor. There's a little piece of stock rubber on the top, and I thought that had to stay in there when I did the other side, but this cap does not fit with that stock rubber on there. So, but like I said, the caliper's still on here. It's not stretched that bad at all. So, but you know, be mindful, because when you take the spring out, you gotta push this down when you're taking it out. So be mindful of that line. See how it's stretching it right now? So be mindful of don't push too hard on it if you still got your caliper on. All right, I got the spring in place with the hat on top. Like I was saying before, you just push this down just enough to get that spring in its bottom perch. Didn't use a spring compressor at all. So now what I'm gonna do to bring this up is just like when you take apart the spring in the first place and you take out the upper ball joint, I'm gonna put this jack back underneath, and I'm gonna take my bar, because it's already in the top of the perch, right? So all I have to do is take my bar and guide that bottom of the spring into the bottom perch, maybe tap on the bottom just a little bit with a hammer as I slowly bring up the lower control arm. And then I also have to be mindful of where the ball joint is going to meet the knuckle. So just like I was saying, come together real easy. Still have the jack underneath the control arm, putting that weight up there, because obviously there's hundreds and hundreds of pounds in that spring, so it takes a lot of force to push it up. And I just pushed it up and threaded that castle nut on there, and then I'll tighten it up. Once it's tightened up, I can take out the jack and button this up and be all done.